Welcome to the Voices of a Black Man. Today, we will be having a conversation with Pastor Al G. I'm super excited for this conversation because he is a mentor to me. He is someone that I've not only I met him as Pastor Al G, but got to be one of the few to know Al G. We're so excited to have him today. If you've been watching the series or if you're new, the Voices of a Black Man is a platform for Black men to share their story through their lens. So we're happy to have you here today. And Pastor Al, we're happy to have you today for I know we're going to have a wonderful conversation because we always do. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Sherelle. Always a pleasure whenever we get together. You know, we kind of have to put a stopwatch on it because we just keep going on and on. But so many exciting things are always discussed whenever we get together.
Absolutely. And I know that we've talked about some things offline about being a Black man and society today, as well as you growing up. And that was one of the reasons why I say we absolutely have to have this conversation because of your perspective and your wisdom every time we get together. Where do you sit today? I'm going to go back and I want to know where you're from, and that's usually the first question I ask. But just today, as a Black man, where do you sit today?
Well, I'm a baby boomer, so I remember quite a few things, and especially with the movement that's now going on. I remember I was in high school when Martin Luther King was assassinated. And I remember the riots that happened directly following that and in the aftermath of that. And I'm looking at what happened today, what happened, the last couple of weeks with George Floyd. So it brought back some memories. It took me all the way back. I'm actually from a place called Opelika, Florida. Every now and then I run into some people. It's actually Miami, Florida. But I was born in Opelika, Florida. And I remember actually, I'm old enough to remember the signs of the colored and the white signs on water fountains and the difference in the communities. But our Black community, when I was growing up, was a vibrant community. I loved going to school. We had a little enclave. It was Black, but I loved school. We had plays and we had all kinds of different activities going on. We had a wonderful Black community. I didn't know anything about being underprivileged until I went there to the grocery store and I saw how white folks lived and I saw how we lived. And then, there was some disparity there. But my upbringing was wonderful. I had two parents that were hardworking people. And I just remember growing up in a great house. It was, they worked hard. And we grew up in church and, everything that goes along with that. But I just remember my upbringing in Florida was just a wonderful, wonderful upbringing. I remember it. I remember, eating cherries off of cherry bushes. And I remember fruit on the trees and papayas and mangoes and all that kind of stuff. I remember. So my perspective is all the way back as a baby boomer and just remembering those times when I was down there in Florida. Because I was in a Black community, there was value to Blackness. We owned our own homes and my family rented, but there were so many that owned their own homes down there. So there was a little community going on. And it was rich. To me, it was wonderful knowing different people, going to school. It was just a rich heritage. We went fishing and we had our fishing poles, throwing them over there in the water, and we went barefoot, and oh my God, it was just, we had great times growing up. It was good for me. You asked me about where I fit into this, and I don't want to talk too much, but my perspective is from way back then, and a perspective of the difference between Black and white way back when. Before I even knew much about a white community, I knew more about the Black community. And our schools were great. Our teachers were great. Our schools were great, vibrant. We were going and growing. So, that's kind of my recollection of that.
Right. You mentioned not really knowing that you were living in disparity until like going to the grocery store and kind of seeing how white people were living. Um, when would you say that the connotation of black, that you realize, wait a minute, I'm not just a, a little boy or young man or man, but I'm I'm black. And what did that mean to you and for you?
Well, I think what happened was you could kind of see the disparity in, what they had and what we had. I mean, if you're poor and everybody else is poor, you don't even know you're poor. But
Yeah.
if you're poor and you go somewhere and you see what people live like that have resources, their boats and their cars and their homes, and and as I said, I remember the water fountain, the one for the black people, was always less than the one for the white folks. So I remember that. And but I never thought, I don't know, instilled in me growing up was that I could do anything they could do. I mean, I just felt like if you give me the same thing you give them, I can beat, I can beat what they do. And I don't mean that as a bad thing, but it was just inside of me. I had this value that, hey, we're valued too. I didn't know them before I knew us.
Right.
And the us that I knew had family. We had uncles and cousins, and we traveled back and forth. The food was amazing. Church food, oh my goodness, potato salad, fried chicken, macaroni and chicken. We just had, so church was wonderful. Well, I grew up in the Pentecostal church, so it's pretty much very, holiness was what we grew up on. And so that was, it was great for me. It was great for me. I didn't really know a whole lot about the differences until I got some exposure. I think when I was 12 years old, we migrated up to Long Island, New York, so my father could find work and better paying jobs. And so when we migrated up there, it was kind of a shock to the system. I mean, we were in awe of what white folks did. We were just kind of in awe of it because they seemed to be doing this and that and the other. And, as a child looking out at that, we were always taught, you be respectful. You always, be nice. My mother always taught me to be nice. I don't know if that was a great thing because it's sort of like, just stay in your place and don't make any waves. Just kind of stay
Mm.
right there. Make sure when you talk to the police, you look at a certain way. And we were taught to be, and there was this other thing in the South, the color. You know, uh, there was stratifications in the Black community for those that were light skinned. I mean, I was light skinned. I mean, that's just the way I grew up. And my if you those that were darker skinned, there was a stratification. It was almost like, wait a minute, those with lighter skin were supposed to be, I guess, cuter, prettier, whatever, and those with dark skin, it was, yeah, it was in the South. It really was, a stratification for that.
Mm.
Unfortunately, that it was that, and then it was also stratification for those who had more money. If those who had more money, those who had more means, they talked, their diction as they the vocabulary is more extensive. You knew the ones that had the money, and in the Black community there was also that. So, and that was also my experience there as well.
Wow. Wow. So do you feel just growing up, and you brought it up, so I'm going to ask, being light skinned, that you got opportunities or chances that others didn't?
Yes. Yeah, my I have a half sister, and I love her dearly. She has a different father than us, and her father was dark, and so she was dark skinned, and there was a difference made from the fact that she was dark, and people would always remark and say, your brothers are nice looking. What happened to you? They would always say that, and I didn't think much of it because I got the light skin, and she was
Mm-hmm.
darker, and so she would always have to deal with what happened to you. So there was a difference. There was a difference made. I didn't realize it until I was much, much older, how hurtful that was. You know, her being in that situation, she just kind of shrugged it off and, you know, just kind of survived it. But it was, you know, it was definitely an experience for her. Now, yes, you know, when we were lighter skin in the South, beauty was measured by light skin.
Mhm.
Beauty was measured by hair. Beauty was measured by how, and you were more accepted if you were lighter of the lighter hue than you were if you were of the darker hue. I could walk into a room, you know, people would know I was Black, but I would be more readily accepted than a person of darker skin. And that wasn't just when I was a child. That's kind of followed us throughout time. I mean, I've had members of my church as a pastor, and some of them were, you know, really, really dark skin. And I saw what they went through just by the color of their skin.
Mhm.
Uh, it was almost embarrassing to me that I had this, you know, I had nothing to do with it. And yet here I was, light skinned, and you know, you're accepted. Even when we went up north and we moved up there, we were more readily accepted than those that were darker skinned. Unfortunate. I mean, who has anything to do with how they're born? But
Mhm.
that was the case.
Wow. 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 I hear there's something that I was taught as a little girl, and I hear you saying that in a roundabout way, is that no one's better than you, but you're better than no one else.
Mhm.
Meaning that we all have something to give. We all have something, to a purpose in the world.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, doesn't matter what. I mean, we all know that it doesn't matter the color of your skin. I mean, some of the most brilliant people. I mean, it has nothing to do with skin color, but then it has a lot to do with skin color because the experience that happens to a person who is of a darker hue. You know, I've even heard men say, "Well, I don't want to," you know, that they don't want a certain color of female, and I'm thinking, that's, you know, what a darker skinned person has to go through is just so unfair. But I've seen people uh, get over that, surmount it, and show and really do a job that, I mean, you can't let that particular the hue do anything. You can't let it stop you. You can't let it be something that stops you from getting in the door. And I love to see people. It doesn't matter where you are. I mean, and as you run into Africans, you know, it's just a wonderful thing to see all the different experiences that people have that never had to deal with the problem of color.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Never had to deal with the problem of color. Wow. So, influences in your life,
Mm. Oh
just
my.
throughout your life, what, who are some of the influences that come top of mind? And I know you can't name every single one of them. I know there are probably a ton, but.
Well, I would say in my life, you know, I was raised in church. I'm a pastor now, and we used to have those. The faith teachers used to be the ones that would really really would surprise me. I remember going to a tent meeting, and I was always interested in miracles, you know, the miraculous. And I've said before, my assignment has to do with empowerment as far as church is concerned. But I remember attending a meeting one time, and this white man, his name was Elder Taylor. He came to the Black community, set up a tent, and he was preaching, and he put his shoes out in front of this woman. And he said, anyone who steps into my shoes is going to feel the power of God. He put him in front of me. I was too scared. But he put him in front of this woman, this woman. She stepped into those shoes and spun around and spun around and spun around until the power of God hit that woman. And it was amazing what happened to her, you know? So that was one of my first memories in a tent revival. He was a man of faith. He believed in healing. And because I had asthma as a child, he prayed for me. And asthma, as time went on, I was healed of asthma. So that kind of shaped my life early on. He was a person that really influenced me. The other person that influenced me was my father. My father was like a staff sergeant. He was military trained. Oh my God, he was just I mean, straight laced, creased. You know, he was something else. He would get us lined up. Just he put inside us so many great things. But you talk about a straight laced person. He was everything around him was clean. He did not play not a speck of lint on the carpet. He did not do that. He would raise us up on Sunday mornings and, make sure we had our shoes shined and all of that. He put some stuff down inside me. Not only did he put, manhood, tell me about manhood, because he worked 3 jobs. He had 7 children. So he worked 3 jobs for that. So, he was always tired coming home, but he always, 2 things he brought. He would bring milk and he would bring bread. And he said, if you don't have anything else, we got milk and bread. But he would make sure we had some kind of food. And I remember him taking care of the family, even though he'd go from one job to another. Now, if we were out of line, he showed no mercy. I mean, if he told us to do something, and when he got home, if it wasn't done, we get a smack upside the head. And even worse, if we really misbehaved, we'd strip the clothes off and the belt would go to flying. And I remember saying to I remember hearing a message preached one day in church about fearing the Lord. I remember saying to my brother, yeah, I fear God, but I'm afraid of daddy. He just didn't play. And so it put a standard inside of me. It put a standard inside of me for, how a house should be cleaned and how you should look. He was pressed, cleaned, all of his shoes a certain way. And plus his profession was, he was a presser and a dry cleaner. And he was so proud of that trade. He was a very intelligent man, but his folks did not let him go to school. He was abused growing up to the point where they didn't let him go to school. And that was something that was, always a source of hurt for him, that he never got a chance to go to school. I think if he went to school, he probably would have been a principal, because he was a very, very intelligent man. But, he was a presser in the dry cleaners. And so my father had a great influence on me. He really did teach me right from wrong. And I think the third person that I really think had a great influence on me was Miles Monroe. The teachings of Miles Monroe about purpose, the teachings of Miles Monroe on so many subjects, he would just break it down. And now in the Pentecostal church, it's noisy and shouting and, running up the aisles, and, we had demonstration of the power of God, and, you didn't have church unless it was noisy and people were banging the drum and, banging on the organ or whatever. But Miles talked about working hard. Miles talked about being educated. I think he had several degrees. Miles broke things down that were so complicated, and he broke it down so you could understand it. I remember attending one of his conferences, an international conference there in the Bahamas, and he taught about leadership. He taught the spirit of leadership, and he broke it down. It just affected my life to know that there is a spirit of leadership, and that we can attain certain heights. And he did that. He had his own plane. He had his, he had other things that got him around. But he was like a dignitary among nations. They would call him in so that he could help them with the problems that they had in their nations. So to be called to the nations, and for them to bring you in, for you to help them to produce. Miles Monroe, not somebody who was, a famous statesman, but Miles Monroe, a great teacher. For him to do that, I mean, even now, I aspire, to have enough wisdom or to have enough knowledge so people will need me to come in and help them with their problems. So Miles was my third person.
Wow. You can tell a lot by the people that you talked about and what they brought into your life. So, which is amazing, of kind of when you talk about being shaped and formed and principles that you have. Let me ask you this. So you are a pastor and you've been a pastor for a long time. You used to be a bishop over in a church, over several churches and things of that nature. And so this has pretty much been a life's work. How old were you when you decided to go and to move into pastorship, or just even to start that path? Because we know that the first thing is not being a pastor, but start on that path. And what brought you there?
I really have to say that um, I realized there was a calling. I mean, how do you describe a calling? It's sort of like somebody has downloaded a program inside you and it's there and it's there. And every time you make a turn, this program begins to come up. It begins to come up inside you. As a child, I always had this thing inside where I couldn't do what other kids did. I always, they considered me the good one. I would babysit the children so my parents could sleep. I was always so concerned about this one and that one. Certain things I couldn't do. I remember, man, one time we were in a store and there was some coins on the counter, and my friend said, "Take it," and I said, "No, I'm not going to take that." And he looked at me like I was a fool, but I just couldn't do it, because there was this calling on my life. The calling is still on my life. And I think from 8 years old, I began to read in scriptures about healing. I've always been interested in healing because I was healed.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of shaped my life. That calling has been on my life ever since I can remember. When I graduated college, Long Island University in Southampton. I graduated college with a degree in sociology, and I was ready to work in government. I became a management specialist, but really that calling began to take over. I had the job that I always wanted to have. I had an office with a secretary, which was my dream. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I had office with a secretary, and so that was big stuff for me. But that calling kept coming to the surface. That calling kept coming to the surface. So actually at 16 was when I actually got saved, and then 19 was when I accepted the calling. Now, my pastor at that point, when we got called, we were supposed to do some training and some classes, and then he got up in the convention and said, "This year, we are sending all of those who complete the testing, we are sending them to places in the United States that we have never been." He put a map up in the convention, first time ever, put a map up in the convention, and took one of these pointers and said, "Elder so-and-so, you're going over here. Elder so-and-so, you're going here." Somebody went to Louisville, Kentucky. Elder Keith, you're going to, you're going to Denver, Colorado. And Al G, you're going to Omaha, Nebraska. Omaha, Nebraska. Where was Omaha, Nebraska? And
where were you at the time? You were in New York?
I was in New York. I was working for the Atomic Energy Commission. It's no longer called that. I think it's Energy Commission now, whatever. But it was the Atomic Energy Commission, and I worked at Brookhaven Laboratory as a management specialist. So I worked there. I was bored to tears working as a bureaucrat. I was just bored. And notwithstanding, this calling in my life just kept coming up, So finally, I left the Atomic Energy Commission, and I drove, when they gave me my orders to go to Omaha, Nebraska to start a church. They gave us a little bit of something to start off with and to go out there and find a building and, make friends and begin to start a church. So I drove to Omaha, Nebraska. Actually, it's a place I'd never been before, but I was so relieved because the battle that was raging on inside of me to accept the calling just would not give me any peace.
Wow.
So it was such a relief for me to finally get on the path to the calling for my life. And I drove to Omaha, Nebraska. I was single at the time. I drove out there and I started with a bullhorn. I started with a bullhorn, sort of preaching to people on the, on the streets and that kind of thing. And that was not my character, Sherelle. That was not my character. But if I was going to get some people, the only way we knew, the old-fashioned way, was, preach the gospel, preach the gospel. So that was not my character. But I got that bullhorn and I got on the street and I started preaching the gospel, and I would knock on some doors and people came to my church from that, and from that time on, I pastored in Omaha, Nebraska for like 18 years.
Wow.
Yeah, that was like that. That was where I met my wife. That's where we had 3 children there. And, I guess the rest is history, but I really did. I learned so much. I learned so much from going there, Omaha, Nebraska. I really did.
During that time, what's the difference between New York and Omaha, Nebraska? Like, what stood out to you the most?
Yeah, the mindset of the people in Omaha, Nebraska. You're not on the East Coast, you're not on the West Coast. It's a Midwest mindset. It's a very decent mindset, I think. The food, they want to give you $1 worth, you're going to get $1 worth, whatever. If you give $1, you're going to get $1 worth. They're not going to try to cheat you or deceive you. I loved the people there were very, very friendly. I made so many friends. And, my church started with sort of a handful of people, and I began to have prayer meetings and that kind of thing and teaching and that. But now the difference in Omaha and the East Coast was pretty much people who are in New York, especially when you're younger, they just feel like the sun rises and sets on New York. And if you're not in New York, you are a country hick. Even people that are out on Long Island in New York, they consider them country or out there, way out there. But yeah, the mindset of a lot of people, even my son now, he lives in New York. I live in Carolina now, and I tell him about coming to Carolina, but he just can't, he would not lower himself. You know what I'm saying? He still does not know all the resources that are outside of New York. And it was kind of the same way. People in New York thought things one way. New Yorkers thought that Omaha was a place for me to go and for me to kind of almost like conquer the territory and convert the people out there. That's not what happened when I went out there. It's not what happened. What happened to me when I went out there was I thought I was going to convert them. And actually, God began to change my mindset when I went out. I went out there with the mindset that, I had the truth and I was going to tell them about it. But what God did was he kind of showed me my hypocrisies while I was there. He showed me different things. He taught me so many different lessons that I never knew while I was out there. I didn't have the support all around me when I was in New York. I had to kind of go for myself. I had to kind of stand up on my own 2 feet and defend what I believed. And some of it I found not to be as sound as I thought when I was in New York. So that's what happened to me as well.
Yeah. You make a interesting point there about mindset and thinking that you knew the way or you had the answer and you were taking it to people so almost a judgment of people before you got there, and then learning that, wait a minute, I can learn some things as well. And I'm pulling that out because in the times that we're in today, I think that is so appropriate, not just for then as you were building the church, but for now, just for humans and people in general.
Yeah, being able to, when I went there and thinking that, I'm going there with, I got the truth and I'm going to show you the truth. But boy, God had other plans. He turned my life upside down and showed me different things. It's like, boy, sit down, let me tell you what it's really about. And he began to show me different things. I was out from under the umbrella of New York. I did not have, I could not have, I could not go and access that support. I tried to call up my bishop. He didn't have any time for me while I was out there. And it's like, oh my God, they treated me, when I got there, there were people that were in denominations, and they did not want anything to do with some young preacher coming in trying to steal their members. Actually, that was not my intention to steal any of their members, but I was treated that way. Like, shut him off because he's going to take some of our members. I wanted to raise my own. I wanted to have my own children, my own members, and that kind of thing. So what I did to other people was done to me. My judgmental ways were shown to me.
Wow.
The hypocrisies of some of the things that I was doing, you don't know until you get into a different situation, and then you see. Now, with the racial thing that's happening these days, I remember when I went there, I think Malcolm X lived in Omaha, Nebraska, if I'm not mistaken. And there was several places there, 24th Street, and there was like an enclave where the Black community sort of was centered around. I found out that there were the stockyards there, and there was Union Pacific, and that's what brought the people up from the South to get those jobs there in Omaha, Nebraska. I didn't see a lot of racial problems there, but I'm sure there were some, while I was there. But, we had I thought we had a pretty good relationship between whites and Blacks in Omaha, even though the history of Omaha was there were lynchings done right downtown in downtown Omaha. I think a Black man was lynched down there. So, it had that history to it, but it seemed like it had kind of advanced from that. People were still fighting for their rights. And there was still, you could still see the economic thing, which you can see nowadays anyway. The economic thing was still there. But for the most part, we had friendship. I didn't see any open, KKK types of stuff. I didn't see that while I was there. Yeah.
Now you talk about Black and white. At any time in your lifetime, have you ever interacted outside of Black and white with other ethnicities, or when did they come? Because living in the South, it was really pretty much Black and white, for a lot of the time that you were growing up and things of that nature. At what point did other ethnicities kind of come into play for you?
I was when I was in the school setting, in the university settings, you meet people of different backgrounds. You meet people from India and people from Africa. And, really, I think education is a wonderful thing because, being on a university, because you get to learn the background. You come with a certain perception, but if you sit down and you may read about somebody's history, or you read about what they've gone through, you may not even understand why they act the way they do or why they have a certain attitude. But if you sit down and you begin to read about it, you take time. Now, college also can fire you up, because if you come thinking one way and you learn the history of Black people and you learn the things that have been done to us, some things, I almost don't want to read because it just makes me so angry that such a thing could ever be done. I'm outraged at it. I think we had to kind of take down a lot because, the police would come in and handle you if you approach them a certain way. But outrage that just kind of is suppressed by us, the total outrage, and I just want to bring this up. When I saw that video of George Floyd, it brought me almost to tears, but the rage that I've been suppressing for so long, it was so symbolic. A knee on the neck of the Black. It was just too much. It's like all of our history just was all encompassed in that one move. A white man with no expression on his face, and a black man crying out, please, please, I can't, and even the statement, I can't breathe. I mean, that sums up Black history ever since we've been here. That sums it up. So learning, I was able to go into, to learn other cultures by studying them when we were in school and having the different people from other nations come to the school where I attended. And I learned about, I was so ignorant sometimes, I approached an African and asked him such an ignorant statement about jungle and stuff like that. He was totally, no, this was a woman. She was totally offended. Why do you call it jungle? Why do you, because she knew with me, I was so naive and so ignorant. Mm-hmm. But once you take time and learn, take the time to learn about people and ask them about their culture. My major was sociology, so we studied culture. And that opened me up not to just be, even Afrocentric, not to just be African-American centric, but to understand that, God has all kinds of people in this world, all kinds of people. I guess the other thing I want to say is, the older you grow, you're supposed to be a teacher and you're supposed to be able to impart wisdom. But the attitude that it has given me, Sherelle, is that I find out what I don't know. I'm more of a student now. I went out there to Omaha, Nebraska saying, God will do this, God will do that, and God will do the other. And the things I said that he would do, he didn't do. And the things that I said he wouldn't do, that's what he did first. What I learned was that he moves. Yeah. What he did last year, don't count on him doing it the same way this year. And so it made me a student in the classroom of God. It really did. Wow. I my bags packed now. Okay, I'm going to study what he did. I'm going to study. And I'm going to be able to teach that. But I will now put a caveat in all of my teaching and say to people, okay, do not enshrine the last revelation that you were shown by God. Because oftentimes he will do that one time and that's it. Then he moves on. You got to stay pliable. If you're going to walk with him, if you're going to teach with him, you're going to have to stay pliable, because what he did yesterday, he may be doing a new thing today. Am I talking too much?
No, you're not. You're absolutely not. No, but I do want to ask you I have two questions, one for this and then one to go back a little bit as you talked about the aggression that's on the inside. But I'll start here because this is where you stopped. So let me ask you this. So as we look as a community, and Black community, African American community, I laugh because there were a time when if you said Black, it was offensive. Negro was the word. Now it's Black, and if you say African American, for a lot of people, that's offensive because everybody says I didn't come from Africa, that type of thing. So to me, it's all in the same boat, right? If you mean well as you're talking about it, and a person's heart if they mean well when they're talking. But when we look at the community and advancing the community in the times that we have right now, I hear you saying some of the things that we've done in the past may not work. We've got to evolve as time has evolved in the way that we approach and move forward in things.
Yeah. I attend a church. I attend World Overcomers Christian Church, and Pastor Andy Thompson is my pastor. Just a shout out to him. But I'm only doing that shout out because the theme of our ministry is balanced victory. Just balanced victory for the God-designed life. And what that has done for me, just even that theme has made me to realize that church can go to the extremes. Either sometimes we can just be on our knees so much that we never get off our knees and go do something. We can give everything over to God's going to do it, God's going to do it, God's going to do it. But not realizing that you got to get up off your knees and you got to go do something. You got to go own some property. You got to go, you got to go vote. You got to go do some things that will help in my denomination, we did a lot of praying. We didn't do a whole lot of protesting, but we did a lot of praying. But you cannot just speak something. You got to do it. You have to step out and begin to do certain things. I love the fact, I love that theme about being balanced. There is a spiritual side and there is a physical side. You cannot neglect one or the other. Both have to come in place. And as you do that, then we'll see much more success. I don't like to be a church that's considered irrelevant. I don't like, being considered irrelevant. Now, I go after the miraculous. I want to know the supernatural. But one of the things that I found out, that just because something is not spectacular, that does not mean it's not supernatural. Mm. There are things that may not rise to the definition of spectacular, but they are still supernatural. What has happened to us recently, this whole thing, COVID and the Black Lives Matter and all of these things, seem to be converging at this particular time. Okay, I don't like to think of God as bringing about disease or anything like that, but I can see a divine move in the way things have converged, the way things have been brought together. I can see a divine move in this, so I'm thrilled. Mm-hmm. There was a frustration going because the old stuff don't work no more. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's a time to really find out what works. Many different things that we've done before don't work anymore, and people are frustrated about that. But I think the thrill and excitement is that it's time to learn some new things. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You and I talking on this medium right now is technology. I don't have to physically be there. There are so many things we can do with this type of technology even now. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely. So when you talk about church, I want to make sure for the viewers and for society that watches this, when you talk about the church advancing, when you talk about the church, are you talking about the building? Are you talking about the people make up the church? What does that mean when you say the church?
Well, for me, I'm talking about organized, I don't want to say organized religion. I don't always like to use the word religion, because sometimes it just means ritual, even though the definition may be different. But when I'm talking about the church, I'm talking about the body of Christ, but my experience has been, I was in a denomination. Okay, I moved away. I moved out of that denomination as God began to give me revelation, because one thing I noticed, that you can learn obedience to a particular denomination, and I think it's proper, as you're growing, to get in line and learn certain things. Mm-hmm. But there comes a time when God begins to talk to you one-on-one. And you cannot say to him, Bishop so-and-so said this to me, or Pastor so-and-so said that to me, or missionary so-and-so said this to me. There comes a time when you are responsible before God. You now have, if he tells you, you need to go and do such and such a thing, you're going to have to do that. Mm-hmm. You can't give him the excuse that my denomination doesn't do it. Right. Because, okay, the church is not just the four walls. Every now and then when I counsel somebody who's had problems with maybe a particular position or person in their denomination, I have to encourage them by saying, yes, this is the church, but the kingdom is much larger than the church. Mm. And so sometimes you have to refer to the fact that we're in a kingdom, and the church, this particular denomination, may just be one aspect of the kingdom. And if you become kingdom minded, then there's not as much warfare and fighting, because it gives so much more space to it. That's the way.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I want to go back. Thank you for clarifying that. But I know that we'll have viewers, some of them who you consider, or we consider saved, and some considered unsaved. And where we're saved and there's certain words or certain things that we know and terminology, I want to make sure that society as a whole, whoever's listening to this, can follow along and understand where you're going and kind of what you're talking about. So thank you for kind of explaining that a little bit more. And so it's not just the building, it's the people that make up the church, and it's the people who believe in God that make up the church and that are saved.
That's true. That's true. I found it that you can, the need for church, the need for organization is that people must grow. There must be accountability. And you cannot just, you can't just push things away by saying, I love God, but I don't like church. No, if you can love God who you don't see, but you got to mix up with people. You're going to have, and I've heard people say, well, I love the Lord and I love the anointing, but I don't like politics. I always stop them right there and say, no, 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 no. You need to learn about how people use power. You need to know about that. Don't shun politics and accept church or accept the anointing, because guess what? For some reason, God has chosen to use people. It would be different if all we had to do is pray and get an answer from him and move off. No, you got to be connected to some people, husband, wife, children, parishioners, folks in the church, deacons. I mean, so many different people. And we do need to know how to work with people. This seems to be God's way. Be different if we just could talk to him and that'd be it. No, no, you got to mix it up with people. You got to rub elbows with people. Somebody got to get on your nerves. Somebody got to make you grow. Jesus picked 12 disciples. One of them was Judas. Judas had to betray him. And Jesus called him friend when he did the betrayal. So yeah, we still have to mix it up with people. It's important.
Wow, that says a lot inside the context of church, but even outside the context of just being human and needing people to grow, needing people to, in a sense, like sandpaper, run up against you so that you're not complacent and comfortable, but that you're growing. That my obstacles can also be my opportunities.
True.
Type thing.
Well, I mean, the other thing is that you come in as a new believer and you need to grow. There are stages of growth. And, God doesn't come down and just sit in front of you and teach you that. He'll give you this wonderful anointing. He'll give you his word. But he also has these gifts in the church, the prophets and the teachers and the evangelists and all of those. And he has those in the church. You have to go through those. Each person needs to learn. You have your beginner, you need to find out what your gifts are, need to learn, first of all, the principles of different things, and be accountable. Accountable is so important. Sometimes the anointing is so wonderful and it's so freeing that we think we don't need to be accountable. But no, you do. You need to be accountable. You need to be able to say, I'm going to be at a certain place and somebody hold you accountable. You need to say, I'm going to do a certain thing and somebody say, didn't you say you were going to do that thing? And then somebody to measure your growth. A mother or a father in church, in a particular group that is watching your growth and feeding you good stuff so that you can grow. And then at a certain point, they need to point you to Jesus or point you to the Lord, and then he takes over. But you got to get there. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. It's just like a baby growing. And at some point, you're feeding them, then they're feeding themselves. Then they're actually living with you, and then they're living on their own. And not only are they feeding themselves and living on their own, but now they're feeding and taking care of their own child. So just the evolution that happens in life altogether. I totally get what you're saying. Now, let me ask you this. I want to go back to the aggression piece, because I think it's a huge piece. And I'm pulling on a conversation, and it may be unfair for you because I'm pulling on a conversation we had before that talked about, in everything that's going on today, and when we talk about the Black man, you talked earlier about the event of George Floyd bringing back a lot of those aggressions, a lot of those things that were deep rooted because of just life throughout, and being a baby boomer and
Yeah.
seeing all the things that have happened in life, and saying that no one's talking about, for men, especially Black men, what do you do with that aggression?
Mm.
What do you do with those things that are rising up? Can you speak to that?
Wow. Um, I know that in order for anything to get done, you have to have passion. Now, I'll tell you something the Lord said to me one day. He said to me, "You people ought to know how to believe." I thought to myself, wait a minute, God, how you gonna say you people to me? And I knew what he meant by that. Black people are in a country where it is written that all men are created equal, endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, and pursuit. And we have never actually been allowed to be blessed by that. And we have, I mean, they made laws to stop us. They hung us. They did so many things, Jim Crow laws, so many things. And the Lord said to me, you people ought to know how to believe. And I'm thinking, okay, God, he's talking about tenacity.
Mm-hmm.
I think, okay, there's emotion. And I've seen Black men get emotional and get angry, and I've seen them get shut down. I saw them, what they did to the Black Panther movement. You saw them stripped down to their underwear. I saw them what they did even to Martin Luther King. We talk about nonviolence, but I heard somebody else say the other day, yeah, you say we should be nonviolent and you killed him.
Mm.
So what can you say? We're going to have to be smart. Emotion does not do it. An angry Black man, okay, people will get out of his way, but here come the police. And that's the end of that. We have survived. We got something down inside of us that's tenacity. I was so glad to see Obama become president. I think we cried. Just the fact to see somebody in that seat. Now, Trump has come behind him now and tried to make that something terrible. But I was so glad to see that. So what I'm going to say real quick is that we're going to have to be smart. I saw the anger when they assassinated Martin Luther King. We cannot just get angry. We cannot just get angry. We're going to have to use our money power. We're going to have to use thinking power.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those two things are going to be important.
Mm. So when you talk about being happy to see Obama, and I know, don't look at me crazy when I ask you this question. When you talk about being happy, is it because it was someone like you that you had never seen in that position, and in a mind of the community, the Black community especially? I say that we had already given the Black card over to Clinton, because we felt like there would never be a true Black man or woman in the White House.
Mm.
And here comes Obama.
I always thought that Black people have something extra. I think that's why they suppressed us. I think that's why they pushed us down, because they know we have something extra. It's a more advanced state to produce color than it is to have the absence of color. White is the absence of color. I mean, I don't mean any disrespect by that, but our race is more advanced. When Obama became president, he was so smooth. He was so suave. He was so intelligent. He could handle the different things and that made us totally proud and then he loved his wife and his children. He wasn't chasing after all the skirts, which we swore with pride with Obama because of what he stood for. I mean, he
broke all the stereotypes.
He broke all the stereotypes. He could just stand on his feet and just, win the argument, which meant so much to us. Plus, he played basketball too. He's athletic as well. So I'm saying he had so much more. And his wife, Michelle, oh my God, I know she doesn't want to run for office, but who would have my vote if she ran for office? Oh my God.
Well, she stood on her own even before being married to him,
Yeah.
right? So she broke a lot of the stereotypes as well.
She did. I mean, a sister A sister
Yeah.
as the first lady in the country, that was, I mean, and her style, both of them, their
Mm,
styles of doing things were just a breath of fresh air.
mm,
I
mm, mm. Wow. So, with aggression, you're telling us to be smarter. We've
Yes,
got to be smarter.
yeah.
But what do we do with the aggression as black men? And I'm saying we, I'm not a black man, but black, what do you do with aggression? Because that's part of the stereotype, right? I talk about, and what the Voices of Black Men is about is breaking the stereotype of being silent, which equals absent, and being angry, which equals aggressive, are the two ways that black men are always seen. And
Right.
if I can't be angry and you don't want me to be quiet and silent because now I'm absent, what do I do?
I say channel the anger. It can be channeled. It can be channeled into writing. It can be channeled into doing. It is a force. You don't have to let it be out of control. When it's out, nobody wants anger out of control, not even from a child.
Mhm.
Control it. Understand that it can be controlled. What have I done? I've written. I like writing. I'm learning notes so that maybe I can produce some music. There is a passion. Without the passion, sometimes anger is the thing that makes you do stuff. And I think that's why God allows it. It makes you do, if you're not angry about it, you ain't gonna do nothing about it.
Mhm.
But when you're angry, you said enough is enough, and then you're gonna go do something about it. But I say, channel the anger. Step back for a minute. When Martin Luther King was killed, I was a high schooler. Those people rioted. I mean, they rioted. They burned down this and that. Oh my God, they just tore down stuff. It had no great effect. But what has had a great effect is people who stop for a minute and think and then direct that anger in a more positive way. That's what I would say.
Mm. You talked to me about Black believers being some of the strongest people around, not only because of the church history, but the history of the country, continually knocking us down,
Right.
never being able to enjoy the fruits of the constitutional laws. And you touched on it just a little bit, but we kept coming back.
Right.
So, and in that there was a rage of people being held under so long, but that's the inside rage. So I think as we talk about aggression, can you speak a little bit to that?
About what the Lord said to me about that. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because being held down for a certain period of time, you either want to give up after a certain period of time. You just, you just don't you don't want to try anymore. Either you're not going to try anymore, or you're it's just going to be hopeless. But when I heard those words, you people ought to know how to believe.
Mm.
I looked at the history, and that knee on that man's neck after hundreds of years, we are supposed to bend free. I even thought about Juneteenth, how it's the time when the slaves were freed. That was years after the Emancipation Proclamation. That is an outrage. That's an outrage that people were still slaves even after the Emancipation Proclamation.
Mm-hmm.
Outrage. There are so many outrages that we have, but I'm speaking to the fact that Black people have something special. It's in our songs, it's in our writings. There's a certain soul. We called it soul before, but
Mm-hmm.
it's even more than that now. When that man cried out and said, I can't breathe, and cried out for his mama, that went around the world. And now even white people are saying Black Lives Matter. That's people of our race have had to endure. People have come into the United States that not Black, they're from a different nationality, and they get more than what we get. I remember in World War II, there were prisoners of war that did better than Black people who fought in the war. Germans were treated better as prisoners of war than Black people were who fought and died. It is such, our entire history is full of outrage, full of outrage. But I would say to a person, do not succumb to the seduction of letting your anger be out of control. You can do things with that passion that you probably could never do without it, but do something. passionately.
Wow. Wow. You know, there's something else that came to me that we kind of talked about a little bit, and it was the statement, you people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That always, whenever we heard that growing up, you people, it's usually somebody from another race. When they said that means they are painting our entire race with those colors. And you know what's coming next? They're gonna say something that is insulting. So when
Mm,
the Lord said that to me, he made me go back and see and think. We are people that have survived. We are people that have had things, we have had our faces shoved in the mud and kept under for so long. But you know, we are some of the strongest believers
mhm,
around,
mhm, mhm, mhm,
even though we have had happen to us the things that have happened to us. We're still strong. You know, I mean, I'm more a believer now, and I've had so many hardships happen to me, but I'm more of a believer now than I was before because I came through something about getting to the other side of struggle,
mm,
something about
mm,
crossing that Jordan of struggle, something about that. If you can get to the, now, if you don't make it, you know, you'll be destroyed in between. But if you can make it to the other side, there is a wealth, something that goes with that, that I can't quite, haven't quite been able to describe it, but there's like a weight of glory that begins to come when you speak and when you talk, when you do things. Experience, I guess, is the thing. It's
mhm,
experience.
mhm.
And then you approach things a certain way and people recognize an experienced person.
Wow. Wow. So you have been a Christian leader for, as you said, majority of your life. Uh, Silent frustrations.
Mm. Oh my God. How long you got, Sherelle? Oh dear.
What comes to top of mind when you think silent frustrations?
I think there are many people, we look at things a certain way. We look at marriage a certain way. And I think whenever we hear marriage, whatever our definition, whatever our experience of marriage comes up, we usually think of it as, some people think of it as Shangri-La. People think of it as, you know, that's the goal. Once they get married, they think they've arrived.
Mhm,
People think of married life as being this and that. But I want to say there are a lot of people that are in marriages, and religious leaders especially, because you're expected to uphold a certain code of conduct.
mm,
Doesn't matter what's happening on the inside. They just want you to look a certain way. It just needs to appear. I mean, you can be having hell at home. You can be having unmet needs at home. You can be having so many things going on, but as long as when you step out your door, you look like everything's okay, as long as you smile or hold hands or open the door or something like that. But, you know, I just hate the hypocrisy of things. I
mm,
hate the
mm,
hypocrisy of it. I'm not saying that we want to always bring out our dirty linen in front of
sure.
everybody. I don't think we ought to discuss problems always in front of everybody. But I also think we need some truth about this. We need to let people know, okay, the wedding is wonderful. You've got cake and you've got, you know, dresses and people are walking down the aisle and oh my God, they're dancing. But, you know, somebody needs to let people know that, you know, there can be silent frustration in marriage,
Mm,
and leaders have to be silent about it. You can't always talk about that. And it's only when something becomes public, and sometimes it's embarrassingly public, that we find out something was going wrong. But I think we need a different conversation. I think we need now to kind of go into these things and understand, give a leader an outlet, some kind of outlet, so you can talk about different things. Because otherwise, you know, you're going to keep it quiet, but the frustration that
yeah.
comes along with being in a relationship that you are not satisfied with, or being in a relationship where frustrations are happening all the time, that is, I think that can be a confinement unlike any other.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Wow. Wow, that's a big one. And I think as we look at leaders, we need to know the truth and not fantasy. We
Yeah,
need to understand reality, and that everyone is human. It goes back to what's happening in today's time, but even with leaders, is that we're all human
Yeah.
and things happen. Life is life and things happen.
But there's a different standard for a leader.
Mm-hmm.
They have to, appearance seems to be, I would say 90% of everything seems to be appearance. What hypocrisy. I mean, Jesus, there was a prostitute that came in and broke an alabaster box over Jesus. And, she was all over him. She was kissing his feet and she was taking down her hair and wiping his feet with her hair. I mean, nobody was doing this to Jesus, and then a prostitute at that. I mean, the people in the house where he was, in Simon's house, were under their breath kind of snickering at Jesus because, if he was a prophet, he would know the kind of woman this is. But actually what was happening was he was getting praise that he really didn't need. He was going to be crucified. And they had insulted him by not giving him just the normal hospitality that would be afforded any person that come into a house. But comes in and the only reason I'm using that example is because appearances are not always what it is. But in a lot of churches, leaders have to look a certain way. But to me, it's immature to judge something by look. But nowadays, myself, I know I have to, as I go out and about, I have to look a certain way. And sometimes I think, boy, how hypocritical. As long as I look like it's okay, it's okay.
It must be okay, which is not true.
They're smiling or this is happening. It must be all right. But I
Yeah.
really, I think Jesus would, he spoke to the Pharisees and the Sadducees. He talked about them being caskets that are painted on the outside, full of dead men. I mean, when truth, do we want truth or do we just want the appearance of truth?
Right. So let me ask you this. That's a good question. Do we want truth or just the appearance of truth? And I think that that's what has plagued our society for so long in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different places. But let me ask you this. And I think millennials a little bit are bringing more truth, more authenticity out. And I use that word lovingly and not as a bad word because I know they hate being called that. But do you feel like, as a leader and a Black man, that you talked about all leaders being held to a higher standard, and I understand we do. All leaders are held to a higher standard, but being a Black man that's a leader, do you feel like you're held to even a higher standard?
Yeah, because even when Obama was president, I remember him doing the State of the Union. And one of those, I think it was a senator that insulted him openly as he was doing his speech. And I thought to myself, if that was a white man, that would not have happened. They have always moved the goalposts when it comes to Black people. They've always moved the goalposts. We've always had to prove ourselves over and over and over again. When we reach the goal, they move the goalposts, so it must be something higher. As if when we bring something, it's not as valuable as somebody else bringing something by virtue of the fact that we are people of color. I will praise in the day. I think I heard growing up that many people would leave the United States and go over to Europe because you were accepted more there. The differences were accepted more there than they were accepted here. We still had that color line here. And even James Baldwin went over into Europe. Other people went to Europe, even musicians, because over here, it was just that color thing. And you never would be accepted just as a person. I love the thought of just being accepted as a person and not some standard being laid on me because I'm colored, so to speak. So yeah, we a standard is higher for us. It takes us seem like more to do certain things and to get certain things than it does for people that are white. It just takes us more. Even in churches, white people will attend. Black people will attend a church who's led by a white man, but white people have a difficulty attending churches that are led by Black men. And that's the stereotype, that's the stigma. Something's tainted about the leadership. Trump kept saying, as long as Obama was president, he kept saying, he's not born here. He's not born here. Like, if he's president, like they just could not swallow the fact that the leader of the free world was a Black man. Something had to be wrong. So they had to find something or stir up something. It was, to me, total outrage that they should try to raise. Here is a man, really, his integrity, the present president couldn't even hold his bags in the integrity that this man has displayed. And yet they had to try to find something wrong to try to devalue his presidency. And that is just typical of what they do with Black men, Black ministers. We always have a higher standard. We have to go farther. They just can do a little bit, and that's, everybody raves about that. But a Black man, he's got to do the whole thing and still is questioned. Yeah, that's what goes on here.
Wow. I have a few more questions as we're wrapping up. This has been amazing. I've enjoyed this time. We talked about earlier, and I talked about the stereotypical box where men are seen as silent, which can mean absence. And definitely there's systematic and systemic implications to the absence of a Black man, from slavery of the master being able to sleep with his wife or send him or the children or the wife to a different plantation, to times when welfare or to get government aid, the man couldn't stay in the house. And so there's been a lot of times that breed some of that silence slash absence in a lot of different ways, or them being able to just come in, you not being looked at as a man, and being treated. We can bring it up to George Floyd and all those, be past and present after George Floyd, because there's definitely been some things after him as well, that just treat you as if you're not a man, that your manhood, and that breeds a lot of people into a place of solitude, a place of kind of retreating, so that aggression won't go to that next level in that way. Can you talk a little bit about the value of solitude, but when solitude can be detrimental?
Yeah, as a Black man, there are many things. Let me just first say, they did a total job on us, as slaves, dividing our families, raising up the woman, putting down the man, giving her more value than him in many instances, just really emasculating him and tearing him down. It takes something for a man to really feel honored. We need to be respected, is what we need. We don't need our manhood questioned. That, sometimes that's such a, it's problematic when you don't know where to stand or how to be defined. For me, knowing that our history is full of them dividing us and learning how to destroy us, and a culture that emasculates us, till trying to stand up as a man, and then sometimes in the family, even our own little interpersonal things. We don't always see eye to eye, Black men and Black women. We don't see eye to eye a lot of times. We want one thing and a woman wants another. And the marriage is a learning process for you to go to the next level beyond being single. Now you're going to care for somebody else, which is, I consider it an advanced state, being married, because you're going to another state. So for me now, there are many things that I feel we are taught not to say them. If you're going to be a man, they say, man up, be a man. Don't say, I feel like crying, or I'm so emotional. No, you don't. No, you're not going to show weakness, especially among other men. You're going to keep it to yourself. Solitude for me has been very rewarding, especially being a religious leader, because those are the times that God can begin to speak to me and give me revelations on different things. I can, when I go out of town and teach or preach, I'm in the hotel room. I don't turn the TV on. I'm just there before the Lord. And it's just solitude. I love it. I enjoy it. Now, solitude also can be detrimental, too much of it. You know, God said to man that he said about man, he said, it's not good for him to be alone. Now, this is after God had spent time with Adam. He said, it's not good for him to be alone. I never knew growing up that you needed a person. I didn't know that. I'm thinking, and you know, in our church, all you need is God. You don't need anybody else. You just need the Lord. But God said, it's not good. He made him, he called him an help meet. That means a help that's suitable, a help that's qualified. You need somebody on your level. You need a qualified help. You need somebody to bounce some things off of. Otherwise, solitude can be self-imposed. Too much solitude can make you like, I think about John the Baptist. The scripture says he wore camel hair and he ate locusts and wild honey. Now that's a bit extreme. I don't want solitude to drive me to the point where I wear camel hair and start eating locusts and wild honey. You know what I'm saying? But too much being a hermit, too much of the solitude is not good. You want to connect. Sometimes that person can be your spouse. That is the person who is the help that's suitable. And sometimes that's not the case. I think when that happens, you know, you have a responsibility to honor your vows. But sometimes there are other people who seem to be more suitable for helping you to talk about things than your spouse. But that may raise a whole lot of questions or a whole lot of people's ire. But I found it that, you know, solitude, yes, it's wonderful, but there are times when you also need to have that help that is qualified. And then you can know I'm not crazy. You can talk to somebody. You can have joy with people, you know?
Yeah. Wow. Wow. That's something. That is that's deep, Pastor Al. That's really deep. Thank you for sharing today. I've got some quick fire questions that are gonna seem crazy, but I promise they're not too crazy. Favorite movie?
You would be surprised at my favorite movie. Let's see. Fried green tomatoes.
Why fried green tomatoes?
I don't know. There was a feeling about it. I don't know. I just love the movie. I just love the feel of it. I love the feel of that movie. Yeah, that's my favorite.
Wow, I got to go to the cafe. Yeah, you know, I'm originally from Georgia, so I actually got to go to the cafe that they used in the movie. Yeah, that's a whole nother story for a whole nother time, because it's deep country and deep woods to get there. But it was an experience to stand on that porch. You know,
Wow.
that was so famous in the movie. Favorite, while we're talking about fried green tomatoes as your movie, favorite food?
Ooh, favorite food. Smothered oxtails and rice with cabbage and mac and cheese.
Now, where did that come from? That sounds good. Sounds real good.
Oxtails. You can cook them so they fall. I cook too, you know. So you cook them so they fall off the bone, and you have that rich brown gravy in there with a little bit of rice, and you gotta add some cornbread there too to make it, you know, to make it worthwhile. And some sweet tea. You gotta have the sweet tea. So.
That's that Southern coming out. That sweet tea.
Oh my God! Yeah.
I love it. Hobbies. Top 3 hobbies.
I have not been able to do it, but travel. I say 2 things. I love travel and I love cooking.
Travel and cooking.
I have not yet gone to Europe, but I want to go around the world. And before I leave here, I'm going to do a lot of travel. I want to go to Greece. I want to go to different other places that I want to go to.
Yeah, but you've been to a couple of places.
Yeah, I was in Trinidad. I went to Africa, a couple places like that. Yeah, so
yeah,
I've started.
You started.
Yeah.
Favorite ice cream?
Oh, my favorite ice cream, 2 of them, butter pecan and chocolate mixed together.
Mixed together.
You got to put the chocolate on the, you got to put the chocolate on the top and the butter pecan on the bottom. That's important in the car.
Spoken like a cook. Like it's a certain way you gotta do this.
Yeah, you got to use that way. Yeah.
Okay. Last rapid fire question. Favorite song?
Ooh, my favorite song. Do I have to, does it have to be, geez. I don't know if I, oh. I like, geez, I like a whole bunch of songs, but Stevie Wonder's My Cherie Amour is probably my favorite.
Is there anything particular about it, or?
I just love the sound of it. It's like a love song,
Mm-hmm.
and I love it, and it's enduring. Years ago he did it, and it's still, once it hits the airways, it's just still beautiful.
It is. It is very beautiful. Let me just say this. I have enjoyed this time with you.
Oh my.
I have learned more about you. And I know that we have more to come. So what's next for Pastor Algie?
What's next for me? I'm writing, so I'm going to write. I do a lot of writing now, and I have another book that I want to get into something about the latter end blessings for older people. I'm going to talk about that, and I want to do something as well about man's spirit.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Wow, wow. All right, so writing and traveling, as we talked about that earlier.
Yeah.
Last words. You know, I like to end these sessions with giving our speaker time for anything that's on their heart, anything that they want society or community or a person to know that they've not been able to be seen or heard on, or just never thought of before. So if you could take a few minutes and just tell us what's on your heart.
Wow. I see this pandemic and this the Black Lives Matter movement happening at the same time now. There's some of it is kind of frustrating to us. Some of it is a bit unnerving and alarming. But I'm sensing that it's time for us to learn more about what God intended for us to do. I really believe that as Genesis said, God stepped out, the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. We don't know why God was surrounded in darkness. I mean, what is God doing surrounded in darkness in the first chapter of the Bible? But we are his children. I have found out that it's not enough for us to believe his words come to pass, but now it's time for us to work on believing our words come to pass. I believe the earth was given to men. Psalms 115:16 tells us that. I believe that we are to take over the family business. The family business for us is earth. Things are not going to happen the way they used to happen. That's very frustrating to us. We can't look at past miracles and past things that happen and think God's going to do things the same way. I believe now God is not going to give us finished products. He's going to give us the raw material, starting out with words and the power of your words, the power of your speech. In the midst of this, all these contradictory circumstances, it's uncomfortable, but we're going to have to begin to get our ire up, our passion up, our faith up, and begin to understand your words are powerful. If your daddy created an entire universe, having been surrounded by darkness, and if you are his child, what can you do? Speaking creative words and doing things along the lines of what you said, you can create another world by your speaking, beginning to use the creative force. He's not giving it to us anymore. We now are given the raw materials. And I believe in the midst of all of this contradiction and all of these things that are happening, it's time for us to create. That's what I believe.
Wow, it's time for us to create.
Yes.
Thank you, Pastor Al G, for being with me today on the Voices of a Black Man. Thank you for telling your story through your lens. For you that are out there and have been watching and participating, listening to us, thank you so much for tuning in to the Voices of a Black Man. We hope you come back tomorrow, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, same channel. If you haven't registered, please get registered so that you get the notice and you can be here. You've seen, you've heard. Now it's up to you on looking at yourself, seeing what biases that may be there, and taking the necessary actions. Thank you so much. I'm CK James, and I look forward to seeing you on tomorrow. Take care.